Welcome in to the Rock Talk Studio, where I find you that next great rock and roll book or documentary to check out. This is the podcast that reviews, previews, and most importantly, recommends to you the good stuff. I'm your host, Big Rick. Let's plug in. Heads up here, because I wouldn't call this just a rock and roll documentary I'm going to be talking about today. This is something a little bit different that I usually don't do for the show. Not just rock and roll here. This documentary includes other types of music, but it is so well done about an iconic person in the history of rock and roll that I just had to share it with you. It's a fabulous new documentary. It's called Sunday's Best: The Untold Story of Ed Sullivan. The Ed Sullivan Show included one of the most iconic moments in rock and roll history. February 9, 1964. That is probably the most well-known episode of the show when the Beatles played. Pretty much kicked off the career of a ton of other rock and rollers who watched that show in February. If I said, what is Ed Sullivan synonymous with? I would say it's probably that. I mean, the Elvis performance of the show was big and no doubt has a place in rock and roll lore, but that Beatles performance pretty much changed the revolution of the planet. And here's the cool thing about this documentary. Ed Sullivan did so much for so many musicians that when you add it all up, it far surpasses that moment with the Beatles. And if you don't believe that, watch this documentary and then we'll talk. The Ed Sullivan Show was one of the first shows that ever had a black performer on it, and Sullivan made it a focus of the show and pretty much his life to support black performers. Harry Belafonte, who pops up a bunch in this documentary, said that Sullivan's decision to book these artists was an act of courage at that time. And that time was 1948. That was when the show first started and the cultural climate was pretty ugly. But Sullivan dug in. He was determined to showcase his talent and go against racial inequality. The show ran for 23 years, and for 23 years, Ed Sullivan handpicked every single performer on the show. And there was more than 10,000 entertainers. I thought that was an incredible stat, and I didn't know that he was the one that was picking every single performer on that show. The clips from the performances are just spectacular. It's amazing how diverse they were. You've got a teenage Stevie Wonder, then James Brown, Nina Simone, Bo Diddley's in there, Miriam Makeba, Sammy Davis Jr., Tina Turner with Ike. There was a ton of live performances included in this hour and 30-minute documentary. The documentary does a great job of showing how Ed Sullivan loved to help out different performers. He would go and scout vaudeville theaters for talent. And he found Cab Calloway there, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Lena Horne, Nat King Cole, all these artists he took and had them come on the Ed Sullivan Show. The documentary uses his voice through most of it, so it's just kind of narrated through his voice. There is a disclaimer, though, that says some of his voice was reenacted using old documents, columns, and articles and letters he wrote throughout his life, but I couldn't really tell the difference. 11 minutes in, after blowing your mind with these performances and a little bit about Ed's story, the doc cuts. And then you start really learning about Sullivan's past and where he grew up. He was born in Harlem in 1901. He actually started out as a journalist, and then he became a sports writer. Pretty cool that they have all this footage of him from 1936 before he was doing the Ed Sullivan Show. He caught a couple of really amazing breaks that led him to being on TV. And doing this show was not the path that he was interested in pursuing, but it was there and he followed it. And I laugh a little bit because the early footage of how uncomfortable he was doing television is great. He always seemed to be looking away and up into the audience. I mean, if you watch his shows, he's kind of famous for looking into the audience. And it was really because he didn't like to look directly into the camera. And it's pretty amazing that he had such a long run of a career primarily on TV for someone who was really uncomfortable with the medium. I have to give credit to the director, Sasha Jenkins, does a great job of showing what was going on culturally during this time and how the artist and Sullivan dealt with it. I mentioned earlier about Harry Belafonte. It turns out he was a really good friend of Ed Sullivan. Belafonte, Smokey Robinson, and Berry Gordy are the primary people who speak through interviews. It really strengthens and gives an inside look of how important Sullivan was to the Black community. At its peak, the show had a weekly audience of 30 to 50 million people. It lasted from 1948 to 1971. 1971, the show ended, and 3 years later, Ed Sullivan passed away. Sasha Jenkins' documentary captures the groundbreaking variety show host and his dedication to showcasing Black performers during the civil rights era. It's impossible to look away. This documentary is so well done. Music fans will love this one. Though not a complete just rock and roll doc, I'm definitely recommending this one for you. Tremendous work. Sunday's Best runs an hour and 30 minutes, and it's directed by Sasha Jenkins. I've got some breaking documentary news, so stick around. That's coming up next. So what's the big documentary news? Well, it's a few titles from two different artists. And what's cool about it is it's the first announcements about titles that are coming in 2026. And the first one comes to us from the camp of Paul McCartney. It's titled Man on the Run. It'll be available starting February 25th, 2026. It premiered this year at the Telluride Film Festival, and the film looks at McCartney's life and solo career after the Beatles breakup. It incorporates new interviews, never-before-seen home videos, and photos from Paul and Linda McCartney and McCartney's personal journals. Man, new McCartney stuff is coming at us strong for the next couple of months. You've got the book Wings, the story of the band on the run, which is going to be an oral history, and that comes out November 4th. That book looks at the Wings period. So it sounds like Man on the Run, the documentary that's coming in February next year, is going to be the visual side of what is covered in the book. It'll be interesting to see the difference of the two. And there's some other McCartney heading our way, and that is a book called McCartney Legacy Volume 2, 1974 to 1980. This is the follow-up to the McCarthy Legacy Volume 1. This is billed as the first truly comprehensive biography and the most finely detailed exploration of McCartney's creative life beyond the Beatles. You're going to get 1,000 never-before-seen documents, hundreds of interviews, exclusive collaborations with all four surviving members of Wings, Jeff Britton, Joe English, Steve Holley, and Lawrence Juber, plus countless other interviews, including producers, musicians, recording engineers, designers, and architects who worked with McCartney between that period of Wings, 1974 to 1980. And that book comes out December 10th. And don't forget, we also have the remastered Beatles anthology, remastered by Peter Jackson. That one's coming to the Disney Channel November 26th. All 8 episodes, plus there's going to be a bonus episode. So let's do the math here. Starting November 4th, you've got the Wings book. Right when you finish that up, November 26th, you've got the anthology 9-part documentary. Once you watch that, you get the Legacy 1974 through 1980 book on December 10th. And right about the time you finished off reading that, because that one's 768 pages, you'll be ready for the Wings documentary coming out February 25th. Wow, that's a lot of Paul McCartney Wings material. If you're a Wings fan, you are in heaven. You don't have to leave the house for the next 4 months. The second documentary that I wanted to talk about was announced to come out in 2026, and it's called In My Voice, and it's from Ann Wilson of Heart. This is not a Heart documentary, which is kind of a bummer. This one will only focus on Ann, and it's Ann telling her story in her words, including archive materials, photographs, journals, and home movies. Interesting move. Curious why it's not a Heart doc. Ann is one of the best female singers in rock, so either way, I'm tuning in. She just released a trailer for it, and it says that it'll be coming out in 2026, but there was no definitive date. That is the new Ann Wilson documentary, In My Voice. Do you want more book buzz and documentary news like this? Well, I've got something really cool for you. It's my monthly newsletter. I want to tell you about it real quick because if you sign up, spoiler here, subscriptions are free, you are going to get a chance to win either a new Iron Maiden book, Oasis book, Tom Petty book, Pearl Jam book, or maybe all 4. how do you get in on the free newsletter? I call it the Rock Talk Studio Blast. It comes out one time a month, and that's the last Friday of the month, so you don't get spammed with a bunch of stuff. You only get it once a month. It includes all new releases, all the dates of when everything's coming out, right up to date. There's a current top 5 that rotates every month. So if you're looking for a reference of, hey, give me the best books you got, best docs you got the top 5, you got breaking news in there, and you are automatically entered to win all the giveaways, all the great books and merch that I give away as much as possible. And all you have to do is just go into the show notes to this podcast. There's a little description about this episode, and then it says subscribe here, click the button, boom, you're in. Next thing you know, you've got the blast in your inbox on the last Friday of the month. Next week's show, I'm going to be taking a look at a new book, so buckle up. We're going to be taking a ride. We're going to be cruising. We're going to be in 5th gear. We've got the top down. I can't think of any other car phrases. New book about the cars next week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love talking rock and roll with you, and love talking about a documentary that's just a little bit different, but tremendous, and does have a lot of connection to rock and roll history. Something I think you're really going to like. Check out that Sunday's Best, The Untold Story of Ed Sullivan. All right, let's tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road. I'll catch you next time in the Rock Talk studio.